The Trickstar Archetype. The Trickstars are a purely female light-attributed fairy-type series of monsters that are based on Japanese idols. They made their anime debut in the Yugioh Vrain series, being wielded by a duelist known as Sky. In the real world, Sky was a quiet and timid young girl. However, in the virtual world, she was secretly a popular dueling idol known as Blue Angel. Throughout the series, she would go through a few persona changes, switching from Blue Angel to Blue Girl, and then finally landing on Blue Maiden. Sadly, as a result of her finding her true self, she would abandon her Trickstar monsters in order to adopt a water-based deck to synergize better with her new water AI. The deck she chose was Burincest. In the real world, Trickstars would debut in the 2016 set Code of the Duelist. And while more extra deck support would release in subsequent packs, the cards you consistently see in Trickstar decks are usually the ones from the first wave. This is because the Trickstars, well, they don't have a very strong extra deck. In fact, most of the time, it's actually better to just leave the main deck monsters out on the field. But why is this? Well, a Trickstar deck is all about dealing little bits of effect damage to punish your opponent for doing a myriad of different things. This could be for drawing a card, for activating a spell or trap, or even for just summoning a monster. These actions will cost the player 200 damage apiece, which may seem insignificant at first. However, over time, those small amounts of damage quickly add up. And if you incorporate a, Dark Room of Nightmare into the mix, well, you could be looking at your opponent paying 1,000, 2,000, or even 3,000 life points for anything that they want to do. In fact, really thinking about it, it's weird Blue Angel didn't win more in the anime. Her deck seemed perfect to dominate. However, in reality, she actually lost a lot. In fact, she would suffer one of the most brutal defeats animated in the Yu-Gi-Oh series. After losing to Spectre, she's thrown into the air, falling head first into the ground, with the impact causing her body to crumple under the weight. Honestly, it's quite a vicious scene, so much so it was cut from the international release. But I'll let you all be the judge. Do you think Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains treated Blue Angel unfairly? Let me know. The Trickstars are based on Japanese idols. An idol is a type of entertainer whose image is manufactured in order to grow a dedicated fanbase. Despite their portrayed perfect personas, behind the scenes, much like the character of Sky, there is a darkness that lingers, as an idol's life tends to be heavily controlled by both their more hardcore fans as well as by their agencies. If they are seen doing anything deemed not what the ideal perfect person would do, well, it can tarnish their reputation. Knowing all this though makes the Trickstar monsters take on a little bit more subtext, since they are idols that are named after poisonous plants. In fact, their archetypal logo is a skull in the shape of a heart, which we can see closely in the artwork of Trickstar Magical LAUREL. Its effect is activate this card by targeting one Trickstar monster in your grave. Special summon it and equip it with this card. When this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. Once per turn, if the equipped monster inflicts battle or effect damage to your opponent, you can special summon one Trickstar monster from your hand. Trickstar CANDINA. When this card is normal summoned, you can add one Trickstar card from your deck to your hand. Each time your opponent activates a spell or trap card, inflict 200 damage to them immediately after it resolves. This monster is the core monster of the deck, as it acts as a searcher for any Trickstar card in the deck. Each Trickstar has 3 things unique to it: what it burns for, what unique item it wields, and what flower its name and design is derived from. These could all be references to how idol groups tend to have distinguishing features for each of its members, making each of them more unique. For CANDINA, for example, she counters decks that utilize spells and traps heavily. Her name of CANDINA at first appears to allude to the Zephyranthus candida, aka the Rain Lily. However, looking a bit closer, if we take into account her unique item, which appears to be a cross between a megaphone and a trumpet, then instead we can see her name comes from Brungmansia, known more commonly as Angel's Trumpet. And as a little reference, if you want to cheat at this game, there's a picture of the flower it's based on in the corner. CANDINA appears alongside 3 other Trickstar members in the artwork of the Archetype's main field spell, Trickstar Light Stage. She appears alongside Lilybell, LYCORIS, and Holly Angel. Its effect is when this card is activated, you can add one Trickstar monster from your deck to your hand. Once per turn, you can target one set card in your opponent's spell and trap zone. That set card cannot be activated until the end phase, and your opponent must activate it during the end phase or else it is sent to the grave. Each time a Trickstar monster you control inflicts battle or effect damage, inflict 200 damage to your opponent. Fun fact, we can see from the perspective of these Trickstar monsters in the artwork of the Archetype's second field spell, Trickstar Light Arena. If you link summon a Trickstar monster, you can target one Trickstar monster in your graveyard that was used as its material, special summon it in defense, but negate its effects. Once per turn, you can target one set card in your opponent's spell and trap zone. While this card is in the field zone, that set card can be activated until the end phase, and your opponent must activate it during the end phase, or else return it to the hand. Now, these two field spells aren't the only field spells in the archetype. There's one more, Trickstar Live Stage. This card shows the perspective of the crowd at another concert, this time being performed by Trickstar Band Suite Guitar and Trickstar Devaridis. Its effect is, when this card is activated, you can add a Trickstar monster from your graveyard to your hand. You can only use each of the following effects of Trickstar Live Stage once per turn. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, except Trickstar monsters. Effect 1, if you control a Trickstar Link monster, you can special summon one Trickstar token. Effect 2, if your opponent controls a card in their spell and trap zone, you can special summon one Trickstar token. Funnily enough, we can actually see a close-up of these two monsters while they're performing. This appears in the artwork of Trickstar Festival. Its effect lets you special summon two Trickstar tokens. If a Trickstar monster you control that was special summoned from the extra deck would be destroyed by a battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. You cannot normal or special summon monsters the turn you activate this card, except Trickstar monsters. Trickstar LYCORIS. Quick effect, you can reveal this card in your hand, target one Trickstar monster you control, except Trickstar LYCORIS, special summon this card, and if you do, return that monster to the hand. Each time a card is added to your opponent's hand, inflict 200 damage for each. This monster punishes decks that add cards to the hand a lot, and is one of the most consistent damage dealers of the deck, since people are guaranteed to draw every turn. This monster's unique item is a sword, and her flower inspiration is that of a licorice plant, which has an interesting bit of folklore around it. It is said that these scarlet flowers typically bloom near cemeteries, making them an ominous flower, as they are believed, if you follow them, they will lead you to hell. Trickstar Lilybell. If this card is added to your hand, except by drawing it, you can special summon it from your hand. This card can attack directly. When this card inflicts battle damage, you can target one Trickstar monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. With the ability to attack directly, and then to add a Trickstar back from the grave, this monster can help deal the final bit of damage against troublesome monsters you might not be able to get past. Comboed with LYCORIS, this monster can actually do a double direct attack, resulting in also adding two cards in the grave back to the hand. Lilybell wields a bell as her unique item, which also helps reinforce her plant inspiration, the Lily of the Valley, which is an extremely poisonous plant that was iconically used in the Breaking Bad series.
Lily of the Valley.
Trickstar Corabane. If you control no monsters, or all monsters you control are Trickstars, you can special summon this card from your hand. During the damage step, when your Trickstar monster battles an opponent's monster, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the grave. That monster you control gains attack equal to its original attack until the end of this turn. Now, this Trickstar doesn't do any burn damage. However, what it does do is help counter one of the biggest weaknesses to a Trickstar deck, and that is high attack points. Corabane acts as a great surprise for the opponent, doubling the attack of any Trickstar monster that they dare battle. Her unique item is a staff, and due to her wintry appearance, it appears she is based on white baneberries, which of course is another highly toxic plant. Trickstar Narkissus. If your opponent takes effect damage, you can special summon this card from your hand. Each time your opponent activates a monster effect in their hand or graveyard, inflict 200 damage to them immediately after it resolves. Narkissus is the answer to hand trap monsters, and as well an answer to the abundance of cards that have effects in the graveyard. Her unique item is a gun, and her name is derived from the Narkissus plant. Also, fun little thing, you see the word kiss in her name? Now look at her artwork. What is she blowing? That's right, a kiss. In fact, we see Narkissus appearing in the artwork of Trickstar Bouquet, holding her namesake flowers in hand. This card's effect is that it can target one Trickstar monster you control and one face-up monster on the field, return that Trickstar monster to the hand, and if you do, the other monster gains attack equal to the original attack of the returned monster. Trickstar Nightshade. If this card is sent to the graveyard as a link material for the link summon of a Trickstar monster, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. Another non-burner. However, she can create a 1-card link 2 monster. Summon it out, link into the link 1, this comes back, make the link 2. Her unique item is that of a conductor's baton, and her name of Nightshade alludes to the Nightshade plant. Most likely, the stinking Nightshade. In fact, speaking of Nightshade, she appears in the artwork of Trickstar Fusion, alongside another Trickstar monster that does not yet exist. Fusion's effect is you can fusion summon one Trickstar Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion materials. You can banish this card from your graveyard and target one Trickstar monster in your grave, add it to your hand. You cannot normal or set or special summon monsters with the same name for the rest of this turn. The only card that this card can summon currently is Trickstar Band Sweet Guitar, which requires one Trickstar Link monster and any other Trickstar. Her effect is effect damage inflicted to your opponent by your Trickstar Link monsters linked to this card is doubled. If your opponent takes damage by a Trickstar monster's effect, this card gains attack equal to the damage they took. Once per turn during the end phase, if this card attacked this turn, the attack gained from this effect returns to 0. Then you can add one Trickstar monster from your graveyard to your hand. Fittingly, since this monster was made via Nightshade, based on its artwork, we can assume that this monster is based on Bittersweet Nightshade. Trickstar Mandrake. If this card is sent from the hand to the graveyard, you can special summon this card in defense, but banish it when it leaves the field. If this card is sent to the grave as a link material for the link summon of a Trickstar monster, you can target one monster an opponent's link monster points to, destroy it. She holds a tambourine and is based on a Mandrake, another of the Nightshade family. In folklore, Mandrake roots were believed to house demons, and it was said that anyone who uprooted them would die. This monster's effect to destroy a monster is most likely a reference to this. Trickstar RHODODE, known in the Japanese as Trickstar Shakunage. You can discard one Trickstar card, target one Trickstar Link monster in your grave, special summon it. Each time a card is banished from your opponent's graveyard, immediately inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each card banished. A perfect card to counter banished decks. Your opponent activates a Pot of Desires? Well, that's going to cost them 2,000 life points. This monster holds a Japanese wooden wand instrument, known as an onusa. Her plant inspiration is a rhododendron, which is known as Shakunage in the original Japanese language. It's worth noting that there is one Trickstar monster that has appeared in the anime, but not yet in real life, and that is Trickstar Bird Helm. If it ever does get an international release, then it will most likely be called Trickstar Wolfsbane, as this is what her Japanese name would translate to. What would her effect be? Well, when she's normal summoned, she inflicts 200 damage to the opponent, and you can then draw one card. However, by doing so, you cannot conduct your battle phase that turn. While in the hand, you can target one Trickstar monster you control, equip this card to it. Your opponent cannot target this card or a monster equipped with this card with card effects, and a monster equipped with this card gains the effect that each time you special summon a Trickstar monster, inflict 200 damage to your opponent immediately after. Moving on to the Link monsters, we have Trickstar Holly Angel. Requires 2 Trickstar monsters to be summoned. Each time a Trickstar monster is normal or special summoned to a zone this card points to, inflict 200 damage to your opponent. Trickstar monsters this card points to cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. If your opponent takes damage by a Trickstar monster effect, this card gains attack equal to the damage they took until the end of the turn. Censored for international release by having her cleavage covered, she would eventually receive an alternate artwork in the Link Vrains box. However, that one too would be censored. She wields a long morning star, and her name is based on the Alcea plant, known more commonly as the hollyhock. She appears in the artwork of Trickstar Reincarnation, the archetype's only official trap card. Reincarnation's effect is you can banish your opponent's entire hand, and if you do, they draw the same number of cards. You can banish this card from your graveyard, target one Trickstar monster in your graveyard, special summon it. The use of carnation flowers in this card's artwork are actually really clever because you can't spell reincarnation without carnation. And I would be amiss if I didn't mention the very, very broken effects that this card can do with another card. Let's say your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand. You can chain Trickstar Reincarnation to that effect, followed then by Droll and Lockbird. This will cause your opponent to banish their entire hand. However, due to Droll and Lockbird, they will not draw a new one. Doing this will most likely automatically win you the duel. Trickstar Devaridis requires 2 level 3 or lower Trickstar monsters. If this card is special summoned, inflict 200 damage to your opponent. If your opponent normal or special summons a monster, inflict 200 damage to your opponent. Wielding a microphone and being based on Psychotria Viridis, this monster is perfect to punish decks that summon a lot of monsters, which in today's modern game is all of them. Trickstar Crimson Heart, known in the Japanese as Trickstar Bloody Mary, requires 2 Trickstar monsters to be summoned. Each time a Trickstar monster is normal or special summoned to a zone this card points to, gain 200 life points. You can discard 1 Trickstar card, both players draw 1 card. But if your life points were at least 2,000 higher than your opponent's when this effect was activated, you can draw 2 instead. Censored for international release by having her cleavage covered up, the blood splatters in the background completely being removed, and extremely weirdly, and one of the weirdest censorships I think I've ever seen, her unique item of handcuffs, well, they have the heart-shaped keyholes removed. If anything, to me, this makes them more unsafe, as you can't get out now. If I really scratch my head and try and think why they would censor this, it is because it's implied to be naughty time handcuffs. I mean, they've got giant spikes on them, so I don't know. It's a weird censorship. Yeah. Oh, and her name, while a homage to Bloody Mary in the Japanese, it is actually based on Lamprocanus spectabilis, also known as the Bleeding Heart Flower. Trickstar Delfiendium, known in the Japanese as Trickstar Devilfinium, requires 2 or more Trickstar monsters. When this card declares an attack while pointing to a Trickstar monster, you can target your banished Trickstar cards up to the number of link monsters your opponent controls, add them to your hand. And if you do, this card gains 1,000 attack for each card added until the end of the turn. This monster upsets me on a personal level because it could be a good card, but the fact that you have to get it out, make sure it's pointing to a Trickstar monster, and your opponent has to be playing link monsters makes this card way too anime. It's so specific to a scenario that probably would only ever happen in the anime. Her unique item is a giant magic wand, and her name comes from the Delphinium plant. Trickstar Foxglove Witch requires 2 or more fairy monsters, making this the only Trickstar monster in the archetype to not require a Trickstar monster to be summoned. Its effect is, if it is summoned, you can inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each card they control. If this link summoned card is destroyed by battle or effect, you can special summon 1 link 2 or lower Trickstar monster from your extra deck, then inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each card they control. Foxglove wields a magical girl wand, and her name is derived from the Foxglove plant. Trickstar Black CATBAT, known in the Japanese as Trickstar Sweet Devil, requires 2 Trickstar monsters. Each time a monster this card points to is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the grave, inflict 200 damage to your opponent. Each time your opponent takes damage by a Trickstar monster's effect, face-up monsters they control lose 200 attack for each monster this card points to until the end of this turn. Her unique item is a scepter, and her name is based on the Taka Chaniteri, known more commonly as the Black Bat Flower, or in the Japanese, the Devil Flower. It has also garnered the name of Cat Whiskers Flower because the plant looks like it's got whiskers on. This monster's a cat. It all makes sense. Trickstar Bloom requires 1 level 2 or lower Trickstar monster. If this card is link summoned, you can make your opponent draw 1 card. If a face-up Trickstar monster this card points to is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each card in their hand. Bloom is holding a broom and is based on the Cystius Scorparius, more commonly known as a Scotch broom. Finally, we have Trickstar Bella Madonna. While this link summon card points to no monsters, it is unaffected by other cards' activated effects. If this card points to no no monsters. You can inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each Trickstar monster in your grave with a different name. Madonna wields a scythe, and her name comes from the Atropa Belladonna, which is more commonly known as Deadly Nightshade. A perfect name for the biggest monster of the deck. It's worth noting as well that there is an out of archetype corrupted Trickstar called Dark Angel. And as well, there are 5 not yet made Trickstar cards. These are Trickstar Vision, Scatter, Temptation, Perennial, and Treat. And with that, that's the Trickstar archetype done. Want to see me play the Trickstars right now? Well, there should be a link on your screen or down as the pinned comments. But other than that, thank you all for watching. Catch you later.